Okay, right now we're going to transition over to the next stage of people, which is, I would say 35 to 50 years old, in that range. Okay, Pastor. So I'm 40, about to turn 41. So I have to admit, like, of course, I didn't do everything right, and a lot of people are in my predicament. You got some intelligence, you know what you need to do, but you didn't quite do what you were supposed to do. Because, when Jay-Z said 30 is the new 20, we started to believe it, and it's okay, well, that means I got 10 more years and not really think about nothing. And then you wake up at 40 years old, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, 40 is 40. I got, you got kids, and some people got grown kids and still don't have the stuff established yet.
Right.
So what's the steps for people from age, say 35, 40, up to 50 years old in that range that need to get started?
Well, and here's what I'll look at. I mean, the age, I think, I'll look at it so as your status in life. Let me look at it that way. Because there may be a 35-year-old that's in the same position as a 25-year-old. They may have just started the program and they may have small children. Then you may have a 40-year-old that may have, like you said, grown children, and they're going to be in a different spot, or they may have children in high school. That's different from a person that's 40-year-old and got a child that's in elementary school. So,
Right.
I'm look at it, from that standpoint. That I'm 40. I'm between that time, that period of time. But my kids are like in high school or they're in college. This kind of thing. Well, once they get there, now my focus shifts. Right. Before, my focus was on making sure that I was sound financially, so my children, could progress. Now I'm looking at a different take, because now my children are either getting ready to leave the house or they have left the house. And so I'm looking at where I am in life. So there are two things I'm looking at from that standpoint. Number one is, am I at the beginning of home ownership, in the middle of home ownership, or the end of home ownership? Because here's what you know. If I'm between 45 and 55, retirement is right around the corner, right? Most people apply for Social Security either 62 or 65, or you want to anyway.
Right.
You don't want to work till you're dead.
Right.
Most people don't. You want to do something you enjoy, travel or whatever. You have those dreams. But whatever, so that's what you're doing now. So my first priority is assuming that I have covered the other things we've talked about, assuming I'm at the 80%, and hopefully by then I'm at 70%, because I have been working the program long enough, and now I'm operating off 70% of my income. And hopefully by then my savings have got to the point where, I'm covered for my emergency money. I have some midterm, I have some long-term set up, but I'm still looking now for planning for that next transition. And the next transition usually is retirement, right? So how do I get where I want to go for retirement, right? The first thing I look at is this. For most couples, not everybody, but for most couples, the most valuable asset they have is their home. That's where most people are. If you have a home that's worth, let's say, $300,000, most people don't have $300,000 in assets somewhere else. There's some that do, but most people don't. So your home becomes your most valuable asset. So then the thing is, if that's going to be my most valuable asset, how do I maximize that? So if my home is not paid for, then I am not maximizing that asset. So the next thing I want to do is I want to say, okay, how do I pay my home off? Within a period of time, so that my working years will allow me to take the money I would have paid to the house and maximize my ability to plan for retirement. So let's say I'm 45 and I owe 10 years on my house, for example. If I'm, maybe more than that, but whatever I'm saying, if I'm 45, here's my goal. My goal is going to always be the house needs to be paid off within 10 years, because the average person will only have 7 to 10 more years of income, without a mortgage payment. So that's going to be my goal. So I got to start restructuring my house payments so that I can make sure I get there. And it doesn't take a whole lot. Again, it's not like it's a huge thing to do. It's all about how I strategize in paying the principal down, because that's, as most homeowners have found out, you pay almost as much in interest as you pay in principal.
That's right.
If you maintain a loan for a long time.
That's right.
So now it's about, how do I take a little bit of money? How do I take that extra money and start paying that principal down? So in 10 years, that principal is paid for, right? Now I got my principal paid for. Let's say, that's been my focus. I'm still doing my savings thing, right? But I've included that in my expenditures now. That's a part of my expenditures now. Okay. So once I do that, I pay it down. Now I got $2,000 a month with nothing to do with, because I am debt free as far as my house goes. So now I got an extra, $1,500, $2,000. Now what do? So I don't have time for the stock market to mess with me. Right. Because by now I am 10 years older. So I got to start investing in a way that I can get return without fear. Right. So I have to look at investments that now have low risk. So what do I look at now? Well, now I got a little money set aside because I don't have a house payment anymore. So I'm looking at municipal bonds, right? But I'm looking at safe municipal bonds, but ones that I know have high yields, right? I'm looking at some mutual funds. I'm looking at things of that nature because I want to be in a position where I don't have to deal with the ebb and flow of the stock market. If I am going to invest in stock, and for people who really don't know a whole lot about that, a mutual fund basically is stocks and other things from several different companies that some manager is using as one unit. So he may have a little bit of stock from an energy company. He may have a little bit of stock, from a high-tech company and different things. And that fund is all those put together. And that kind of leverages so when one is up, one is down, it balances it out. And that keeps me from having the burden of trying to manage it myself. If I do want to buy some stock, I want to buy stock at that point in my life, not thinking that it's going to be, like you said before, that, right money. I'm looking at companies that have shown themselves to have a steady increase over the long term. But I'm also looking toward the future. And I'm saying, like, there's some companies that are not going to go down with technology, right? Here's what we thought. See, we thought buying clothes, you had to come inside the store, right? So people bought a lot of stock in companies like Kmart and Macy's and places like that. And people built big shopping malls. Here's what we found out. No, they don't. And so if you bought stock in Macy's, you are upset right now. If you bought stock in some of these larger, companies, you're upset because they're under, Walmart. I can tell you because I'm upset right now because I had Walmart stock. Okay. Yeah. Not Walmart, I'm sorry. I had, not Walmart.
Kmart?
Kmart, thank you. I had Kmart stock, right? Kmart stock.
Oh, yeah. You paid a high right now.
Yeah, right. So it's almost worthless, right? But you want to look at those companies where they are positioned so that if technology changes, it has little to no effect on them, right? Because some of them are able to change with the times. Like most energy companies will change with the times. They don't go out; they keep going. So like we take the average company that provides electricity, for example. They're going to be pretty stable because they might use a different source to produce the electricity, but they're going to always produce electricity. They might go from coal to natural gas to nuclear to wind, but they're going to keep producing the electricity. So the industry is going to stay stable. So you invest in those kind of industries, and that way, it's going to be a slow progression, but it's a safe progression because then you're planning for retirement. So what you're looking at is how much money do I need for retirement? Well, the house is paid off, so I don't have to deal with that anymore. So how much do I need? And that kind of leverage what you're going to do. The other thing I suggest people do is you look at your vehicles and you say to yourself, you don't have to, but you really don't want a car payment.
That's right.
Not really, because you know what? That's throwing money away. Why? It's going to decline. Unless you buy a Bentley. If you buy a Bentley, that's about the only car
it keeps it right.
That's going to keep its value.
That's right.
So the other thing is to ask yourself, what kind of car can I live with for 20 years?
Yeah.
And that's what you do. You get that car because that, again, you're stabilizing expenses.
Yep.
And that way you don't require as much income to maintain the same lifestyle.
Right.
The other thing I say for people who, when you're looking at how you save money at that stage of the game is that a part of your planning, certainly at that point, has to be vacations. Because, and I mean, real nice vacations. Because you're at the end of the road, let's say.
Right.
You begin at the end of the road, and you don't want to walk away saying, I left it on the table, right? And so a part of that savings plan is those things, as people say, what are your bucket list items, right? And you want to be able to do a bucket list item every year. So your planning has to be that bucket list every year. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So every year is something major happening as you're moving forward.
Yeah. What's funny, in Houston, there's a Bentley dealership in Houston. And you can go in there, get a new Bentley for $350,000. There's a Bentley 2 cars down, used, 3 years old, 20,000 miles, $150,000. It looks exactly the same as the brand new Bentley. But this is back when the oil money was really flowing in Houston. People was buying the new Bentley and then literally turning it back in after 3 years and then getting a new Bentley. So at that time frame, my dad thought I was crazy. I said, I don't go down there and get me a Bentley. It was $150,000. I did the payments on it. I was like, I can own a business. I can turn this over. And granted, like I said, I was young. And it's like, I'm just thinking about being a Bentley. But it's the same concept. But if you take your mind out of that and say, okay, let me put it into a real asset. Because there's some people out there that you're running a business or you got a side hustle that's generating some money, and right now you're just kind of spending it on the weekend. But what would happen if you put, like you said, put it back in the house, make principal payments to it, and get the house note paid down? Then all of a sudden you have money built up to where you can have the 25% down from the investment property that you've rented out. Then you got another asset. You have all these other assets, which we talked about before, with the streams of income that you can easily set up now when you're in your 40s, because for most people, I would say this, how you think when you was 40, you don't think that way. Like how you was at 20, you're not the same way at 40.
Yeah.
Whole lot is going to have changed for you. So you can have a different thought process.
Sure.
So things should click easy. Even though you was hearing it when you was 20, it just wasn't clicking. And now it's starting to click. And that's one thing, Pastor, when we talked about doing this podcast series, is like, this would be real good to, 20-year-olds to the 45, 50-year-olds say, okay, I'm going to hit y'all in all different arenas.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, if you're planning for security, that no one should plan to have a house payment, and you talk about having that flexibility now. No one should have a house payment over 55. If you're over 55 and you have a house payment, you haven't planned properly. Okay, even if you're upgrading, because I'll give you an example. Let's say I bought my first house at 20. Let's say I bought it, 25. Let's say I bought my first house at 25, right? And I paid it off in 15 years, right? That means now I am 40, right? So if I'm 40 and I said no one should have a house payment over 55, that means I got between 40 and 55 to save money.
Right.
Right? Now, if I start saving money at 40 years old and I got no house payment,
right,
every dime I would have had a house payment on, I can now save.
Right.
Now, when it's time for me to buy a new house, I got an old house that's worth about $300,000.
Right.
I done saved up over $300,000.
Right.
Right? I can walk in there and pay cash for the house.
Right.
Now, or I can build the house now.
Right.
And I can save all that profit that I would have paid someone else.
That's right.
And I can tell you, I'll use myself as an example. Okay. I did that in a piece of property that I own. I was the contractor myself. Okay. It cost me approximately $120,000 to build the home. The total square footage is 3,600 square feet. Now, all of it's not built out. Only half of it is built out. Other part is not built out. It's 3,600 square feet. 1,800 feet is complete. It is currently valued at $250,000. right?
Mm-hmm.
The moment it was completed, it was valued at $200,000, but it only cost me $100
120.
to build because I cut out the prime contractor. Because all the prime contractor is going to do is call the sub up
Mm-hmm.
and say to the sub, you come do this and you come do that. Well, I know how to call the sub up and say, you come do this and you come do that.
Right.
But and that's what I'm saying is that if the person that is at that part in their life juncture make that decision, by the time they get a certain age, you certainly always have the option to go buy a home already built.
Mm-hmm.
But you already have your house that you're living in. So it's not like you have that, you have to rush and find a place to live. You're living in a house that is paid for, right? Plus, you have been saving for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the liquid assets to say, hey, listen, this is what I want to do. Here's one way to do it. This is what I do in the current house I live in, right? You take your liquid assets and you buy the land. You take the land and you borrow money. You take that money and you start paying the builder. Once the house gets built just enough where you can move in, where you can get a certificate of occupancy, you sell your old house. Then you take that money and you finish paying, you pay the loan off that you got.
Right. Makes sense.
And now you're in the house.
Right.
You ain't got that one payment to make.
Right.
And good to go. But again, you have to plan. You can't plan for that overnight. And that's the point you brought out before about the millennials, right?
Right.
That's not something you can say, well, I'm going to start today and I'm going to finish it tomorrow.
Right.
That's something where you're saying to yourself, well, I know I want to be a certain place at this age.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm now a millennial and I'm in my 20s and my early 30s, then I can put that plan in process. By the time I'm 55, I will have the house of my dreams, and I will not have a house payment, but I'll be in the house of my dreams. Now the money I would have been making for a house payment, I can take that money and do all kinds of things with it. I want to do it wisely, but I can do all kinds of things with it because unless I die, I'm going to still grow older.
Right.
Now from 55 to 65 is another 10 years. Now, if I'm in 10 years' time, the money I would have been putting on a house, I'm now investing that money.
Mm-hmm.
So now when I'm 65, I'm now a millionaire again.
Right.
Because I have invested that money wisely. So now I'm retiring as a millionaire. I haven't made one extra dime. It's not like my salary went up or none of that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
But just because of the way I manage those funds, now when I retire, hopefully Social Security will be there. I kind of doubt it that millennials will be able to draw Social Security.
Right.
But if they are, you got your Social Security check, you got a retirement check from whatever company you work for, and you got about $1 million stashed away somewhere. And again, if you can just pull 5% down off of $1 million, you're in pretty good shape. And there are investments where you can pull 5% down.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, you can put it in an online account and draw 2%.
Right.
You can put it in an online CD, but you do it in incremental stages, which I forgot to point out, but I should point out. You put it in a CD and you put it in incremental accounts in the CD. So let's say, for example, you've been saving up all your money and you got $100,000, right? You want to put it in CDs that mature in 1 year increments, right? Mm-hmm. So you have one that's going to mature in 5 years, one in 4 years, one in 2 years, one in 1 year, like that. That way the money keeps turning over each year. So each year one matures for me. And the older ones will have a higher return on investment, obviously. But one is turning over each year. And then you keep putting it back in, so it keeps turning over each year. But you keep pulling the interest out each time.
Right.
And that way, that's once you are retired, you keep pulling the interest off of that money. But again, if you do the plan that we just talked about, and it doesn't take a lot to do, by the time you're 65, you got $1 million to the side. And you can take $200,000 and keep, and do it that way. You can be pulling enough money out of those accounts just on the return to stabilize you, because you don't have a house payment anyway.
Yeah. So yes, people understand it's a lot of information to take in, and I am also trying to convince Pastor that we can do something like this, like we did the marriage retreat, a financial retreat where people come together and as couples or as just yourself, and sit down and just map out and get a good plan for your financial future so you can have financial freedom. is your host, CB Baker. Till next time.